He was only 5 years old when he promised to marry her. But what happened 20 years later will break your heart. Do you believe in the power of promises made in the innocence of childhood? For Lucas and Sofia, kindergarten was the stage for a commitment that would shape their lives in ways they could never have imagined. This is a tale of love, loss, and the incomprehensible power of fate. Stay with me until the end, because the outcome of this story will move you deeply. Lucas and Sofia were inseparable from the first years of their lives. At preschool, they shared not only toys and laughter, but also a bond that seemed unusual for such young children. Lucas was always the protector, pulling Sofia by the hand when something frightened her, and Sofia, in turn, had a sweet way of calming Lucas down when he cried at being away from his parents. It was as if, even in their innocence, they had found each other in a way that transcends explanation. One day, while they were playing under the old oak tree in the schoolyard, Lucas, with a smile full of childlike confidence, said, "One day, I'm going to marry you." Sofia, surprised and laughing, replied, "All right, but you have to promise." Without hesitation, Lucas clasped her little finger in his, a simple gesture, but one that would mark their memories forever. However, the magic of those moments didn't last long. On the last day of school that year, the principal announced that Lucas's family was moving to another city due to his father's work. Sofia, even as a little girl, felt the weight of the farewell, and Lucas, holding back tears, promised once again that they would meet again. The move was a hard blow for both of them. Sofia returned to school the following year and found the place Lucas used to occupy empty, an absence that seemed greater every day. Life moved on, as it always does. Sofia grew up, made new friends, learned new lessons, but never managed to completely erase the memory of the boy who had promised to marry her. From time to time, as she passed that oak tree, she felt a pang of longing and wondered where Lucas was. Lucas, on the other hand, also felt the weight of separation. In the new city, he found it difficult to adapt. Memories of Sofia and carefree days under the oak tree became his solace on lonely nights. Over time, however, these memories began to blend in with adult life, slowly being pushed to the back of his mind. The years passed, and fate followed unpredictable paths. Sofia became a determined woman, building a solid career in a big city. She had clear goals and an active social circle, but in quiet moments she wondered why something seemed to be missing. Her life looked complete on paper, but her heart still held an empty space that she was never able to fill completely. Lucas, on the other hand, had a more turbulent path. After facing financial and emotional difficulties, he found a stable job, but felt he had lost something essential along the way. Sometimes, on sleepless nights, he would remember Sofia, that naive promise and the genuine feeling she carried. He wondered how she was and if she still remembered him. The two led parallel lives, never imagining that fate could bring them back together. Until a seemingly insignificant event set fate in motion. Sofia, tired of the frenetic routine of the big city, decided to visit her hometown to breathe new air and spend time with her family. She wasn't planning any big reunions, nor was she thinking of reliving the past. For her, it was just an opportunity to slow down. Meanwhile, Lucas, who had returned to the city years before to help his elderly parents, was living a quiet life, far from the chaos of the past. He had rebuilt some of his inner peace, but felt that something was still missing. On the first afternoon of her visit, Sofia walked through the city center, observing how everything seemed smaller than she remembered. Every corner brought flashes of childhood memories, and when she passed the newly refurbished cafe near the main square, she hesitated for a moment. It wasn't the same place where she used to buy ice cream with Lucas, but something about the atmosphere pulled her in. She went in and ordered a coffee, unaware that, at that very moment, Lucas was just a few steps away, finishing his shift in a hardware store. The meeting was about to take place, but neither party knew what fate had in store. Sofia sat by the window, lost in thought, while Lucas strolled casually down the street, looking at the square as he did every afternoon. It was then that their gazes met for the first time in years. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. Sofia recognized those eyes, now more mature, but still so familiar. Lucas was surprised too, and it took him a few seconds to believe that he wasn't dreaming. Sofia, still surprised by the reunion, wondered if she was really seeing Lucas, the boy from preschool, or if it was all just an illusion caused by nostalgia for her childhood. But what she felt when she looked into those eyes, now more mature and full of stories, was more than a memory. It was as if a part of her own past was returning, as if time had mysteriously bent and given them a second chance. Lucas, on the other hand, was paralyzed. He didn't know whether to get closer, whether it was real or whether the distance of so many years had made him create an idealized image of Sofia in his mind. But when he saw her smile, something welled up inside him, as if the childhood promise was still there, alive, waiting to be fulfilled. For a moment, neither of them said a word. The cafe was silent, but their hearts were beating faster than usual. It was Lucas who broke the ice, slowly approaching the table. He sat down opposite Sofia with a shy but genuine smile. What would happen now? Would they simply go back to being childhood friends, or would that connection that had never been broken take a different turn? Did you really come back? Was all Lucas managed to say, his voice hesitant but charged with emotion. Sofia, still in shock, smiled with a mixture of surprise and affection. I didn't expect to find you here, he replied, his voice soft but with a slight tremble. I didn't expect you either, said Lucas, as his gaze wandered over his hands, trying to find the right words. They spent a few minutes talking about their lives, as if time had just been a pause. Sofia talked about her career, the places she had visited, the friendships she had made, and the hectic life she had led in recent years. Lucas, for his part, shared his experiences in the city, the work that kept him busy and the personal difficulties he faced along the way. But there was something hanging in the air, a feeling that there was more to that conversation than just updates on their lives. What would happen to that promise made so many years ago? They couldn't ignore what they felt, or what seemed to still exist between them. Each word seemed to carry a greater weight, and for a moment, they found themselves in a heavy silence, as if they were both waiting for something. It was Sofia who finally brought up the unspoken question. Lucas, do you still remember the promise? She looked at him, her eyes fixed on his, searching for the answer, but not knowing if she really wanted to hear it. Lucas remained silent for a few seconds, as if the weight of those words had transported him back to those innocent days at school. He smiled slightly, but there was a subtle sadness in his eyes. I remember, he said, his voice low, almost as if he were apologizing. But I don't know if I can still offer you what you deserve, Sofia. These words, simple but loaded with meaning, cut through the air between them. Sofia sat still for a moment, absorbing what he had said. What did it mean to her? Did she still believe in Lucas' promise, or had time and distance erased that childhood feeling? But then she realized that she wasn't there to wait for a Prince Charming or an idealized love story. She wanted to know who Lucas really was now, the man he had become, the human being behind the promise they had both made. I'm not here expecting you to be the same boy from preschool, Lucas, she said firmly. I just want to know if what you feel now is real. We don't have 5 years left, but is there still something that can be built from here? The question hung in the air between them like a cloud. Lucas looked at her, feeling the weight of her words, and at the same time, the lightness that seemed to come with the honesty of that conversation. Maybe that was what he needed, someone who would accept him for who he was now, and not for the boy he had been. I don't have the easy answers, Sofia, he said, his voice firmer now. But maybe it's time to try something new. We can't just go back and hope that what we had growing up is enough. We need to build something real, in the now. Those words seemed to finally open a new chapter between them, a chapter that was no longer stuck in the past, but fed off it to create something new. What would come next was uncertain, but the promise of starting again, now an adult, seemed stronger than anything they had ever experienced together. The conversation went on for hours, passing through laughter, confidences, and even moments of comfortable silence, as if the connection between them had been renewed and strengthened in a way they had never imagined. But more importantly, they were both willing to explore what lay ahead, with no rush, no exaggerated expectations, just a willingness to see where fate would take them. After all, what does fate have to offer when two people finally meet, years later, with old promises and hearts ready for new paths? Time seemed to have disappeared as they exchanged laughs and stories, their eyes meeting more and more, as if the years of separation had never existed. However, a strong, indescribable feeling began to emerge in both their hearts. It was as if something was pulling them towards an inescapable destiny, a destiny that could no longer be ignored. The words that had been spoken, the raw honesty between them, were creating an atmosphere charged with palpable energy. Sofia felt the weight of the moment, the inner turmoil, and wondered if this was the turning point in her life. She could no longer tell if it was all just nostalgia, or if, in fact, what they shared still had the strength to build a future. Lucas also felt the intensity of the moment, but something inside him prevented him from making a decision. Perhaps it was the fear of what might happen if he gave in to that feeling. After all, he knew that fate would not be fooled. If they wanted to move forward, they would have to confront the ghosts of the past and throw themselves into a path that required courage and vulnerability. That's when Sofia once again looked directly into his eyes and asked what neither of them had dared to ask until that moment. "Lucas, what do you really want from now on? How do you feel about me now? Because I can't ignore what we're going through any longer. I can't go back anymore." Her words cut through the air. What would he say? Lucas felt a growing pressure, as if the universe itself was waiting for his answer. He had kept inside himself the wish that one day she would come back, but he had never known if he was ready to receive someone as strong and independent as Sofia. He was faced with a choice. On the one hand, the comfort of the security of what he knew, and on the other, the unknown with the risk of failure, but also with the promise of something genuine and intense. The silence that followed was overwhelming, and for a moment, neither of them dared to break it. Then Lucas took a deep breath and, his voice low and full of emotion, spoke, I thought this moment would never happen. For so long, I held on to the idea that what we had was something from the past, something beautiful, but that it would no longer fit into our lives now. But after seeing you here today, after feeling all this, I realized that maybe what I wanted all along was you, Sofia. No longer the promise of when we were children, but the promise of what we can be now. I don't know what it's going to be like, but I know that, somehow, everything feels right. Sofia looked at him, surprised, but at the same time, something inside her chest warmed. It was as if all the pieces were suddenly falling into place, as if the void left by years of distance was being filled, not by a magical solution, but by Lucas' sincerity. She felt a whirlwind of emotions. Part of her wanted to take a step forward, to take the risk, to throw herself headlong into this new chance. But another part knew that for it to really work, she would also have to give up some certainties, some fears that had guided her for so long. I don't expect you to make me promises you can't keep, Lucas, she said, her voice firm but charged with emotion. I just want to know that, together, we can create something real, without rushing, without forcing anything. I don't know what the future holds, but I do know that this moment is happening now, and that's what matters. Her words echoed in the silence, and Lucas couldn't help but feel a wave of relief and emotion wash over him. They were telling the truth, and that was all that really mattered. There was no more room for false promises, for the ideal of what might have been. What they had now was something much deeper, something that united them in a new way, without the ties of the past. The moment dragged on for a long second until, finally, it was as if everything around them disappeared. The distance between them was no longer an abyss. It was a space of possibility, and they were both willing to fill it with something that would make them grow, side by side. Lucas stood up, holding out his hand to Sofia. "Are we going to find out together?" he asked, his eyes shining with a mixture of hope and insecurity. Sofia looked at his outstretched hand, feeling the energy of that offer. She knew that this was not just a symbolic gesture, but an invitation to a new beginning, a new chance to build something solid and real, without the promises of childhood, but with the strength of what they had experienced there, at that very moment. She took his hand, feeling his firmness and courage, and with a soft smile replied, "Yes, let's go." That simple exchange of words, that simple gesture, was the turning point. It wasn't the happy ending of a fairy tale, but the start of a real journey, where destiny didn't have to be mere chance, but something they could build together, day by day, with their eyes turned to the future and their hearts open to the unknown. What began as a childhood promise, something spontaneous and full of innocence, evolved into a mature choice, full of meaning. Over time, Lucas and Sofia faced the uncertainties, fears, and pains of life. But when they met again, they discovered that what united them was not an ideal or a distant memory, but a real connection, built on the choices they made every moment. They had surpassed the expectations of a fairy tale, recognizing that, rather than being a simple repetition of the past, the love they shared was now stronger, more grounded in mutual trust and a sincere desire to grow together. What awaited them from now on was not a road without challenges, but they both knew they were ready to walk side by side. They had learned the importance of not letting themselves be governed by fantasies of what should be, but rather accepting what could really happen by opening their hearts to the present. The reunion didn't bring ready-made answers, but it was the milestone of a new chapter, where true love was no longer a distant promise, but a conscious, shared choice. Life, as always, would continue to offer obstacles, but now they knew they had each other to face whatever came their way. Destiny, contrary to what they had imagined, was not something to be passively awaited, but something to be actively constructed. They no longer had to live with the idea that they had lost time or opportunities. Instead, what had been lost became the basis for something stronger, more resilient. The future was in their hands, and they were ready to write their own story, with the promise that the best was yet to come. Just for those of you who like a good story and watch to the end, leave your comment below from which city you're watching. And there's one more thing. Rich man pretends to be a beggar in front of his own mansion. The ending will surprise you. That's the theme of the video I've embedded here. Just click and watch. I'll see you there.